Hey, we're here at COP21 in Paris. I'm Catherine Hayhoe. This is John Cook, better known as the brains behind Skeptical Science. If you have never heard of Skeptical Science before, you have to check it out. They have an awesome website and even an iPhone app that answers every single but what about question you've ever thought of climate change. Now, once in a while, you might find there's a question that they haven't answered yet. Such as, is the Cowspiracy movie that says that we can fix climate change by going vegan correct? So I emailed John and Dana and they said, well, we'll just write a little article about it right away. So now there's a new article on Skeptic Science talking about going vegan, fix climate change. And the answer is, John?
Well, actually, there's no real simple answer to that, because I've been talking to people all week about the solutions to climate change, and the one thing probably the one take home I've learned from it is there is no magic bullet.
Exactly.
Right? So arguing going vegan is a solution, or wind power is a solution, or is the one answer. They're all part of the answer. They're all part of the suite of solutions. Mm-hmm. And so I think that arguing that the way to solve climate change is by going vegan it's oversimplifying. It's just one little piece of the puzzle.
That's a great way to think about it. So let me ask you a personal question. What is your favorite thing that you do in your own life?
My favorite thing in terms of reducing emissions?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay, so
we did not script any of this. This is all off the cuff.
So I think that when I first started thinking about climate change, one thing that the Queensland government was doing, which I liked, was they were offering these little smart meters, which just enabled you to monitor your household usage. Mm-hmm. And that did two things. Firstly, it just got me thinking about electricity use and power use, and I think just changing your mindset to being mindful of your energy use is a really important switch. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting kind of like when I was a child, my dad would start thumping on the wall whenever he showered for too long. And I didn't know at the time, but he was an environmentalist, way decades ahead of his time.
Our parents and our grandparents were.
Right.
I mean, the whole waste not, want not, turn off the lights, why do you leave the car running, all that.
He wasn't a grumpy codger, he was a tree-hugging hippie apparently. But and I kind of started to channel my grumpy old dad and started obsessing about the electricity use of the house, and I'd walk through the house with the meter and turning things off and watching the numbers go down, trying to get it. It was kind of like the COP negotiations, trying to reduce emissions down, but in my own household usage.
That's really cool. Well, that is total psychology, because psychology has shown that if we monitor something, even if we don't have a reduction target, we'll still end up reducing it. So like, for example, with losing weight, one of the best things we can do is just write down what we eat. Like, I have this little app on my phone called Lose It, and if I know that I'm gonna have to write down that extra bite that I took from the kitchen in my app, I don't do it. So in the same way, having a monitor on your house makes you realize, oh my goodness, I left a bunch of lights on and now what happened?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I mean, and I think that the psychology is really important, and I think that's one of the biggest contributions that psychology can contribute to climate change is helping communicators and policymakers to come up with policies and solutions that I guess factor in how people think, how people change their behaviour, and so that we're taking evidence-based, efficient, effective approaches.
Exactly. Social science evidence-based.
Yeah, social science is awesome.
I feel the same way. So I'm talking with John Cook from Skeptical Science here at COP. These broadcasts are live, but I am saving them on my phone too, so we're going to repost them on Twitter or Facebook after we're done. So if you feel like you missed the first part of the conversation, it's okay, it'll be back up. So that leads perfectly into my next question, which is that Skeptical Science is known for focusing on the physical science of climate change. So if anybody has any questions about how do we know that climate is changing, was the thermometer record corrupted, what about the medieval warm period, weren't the dinosaurs around during warmer periods, if anybody has any science questions, that's what Skeptical Science does. But your career has taken a turn in a very different direction, as has mine. I started off in geoscience, I'm now in political science. You started off in solar physics?
Yes, yeah.
And?
Well, yeah, I started doing astrophysics.
Oh, that's what I started in too, actually.
Right, yeah.
I should have said that. Yeah, I started with astrophysics. I was studying quasars.
Right.
Yeah.
Solar granulation.
Okay.
I'm really glad I'm not doing that anymore.
Exactly. So two astrophysicists now doing climate research. And then?
Then I actually went out of academia for a while, and then started. The way I got back into climate change was just starting the Skeptical Science website doing climate communication, but coming at it from a physical science background, wanting to explain the physical science.
Exactly.
And doing that for several years. At one point I got an email from Stephen Lundowski, a professor in cognitive psychology, and he just sent me a paper saying that when you're debunking myths, if you do it wrong, then you can actually reinforce the myth and make things worse.
Exactly.
And I compared the model of how to do it wrong. I compared it to how I was doing it,
Yes.
and it was the same.
Oh no.
And so I was like, had this sense of horror, like, have I been making things worse for the last couple of years?
And that is the story of any scientist, because we just feel like facts are going to fix the problem.
Right.
If people have an information that is incorrect or an opinion that is incorrect, if we just offer the facts, they'll change their mind, because that's what we do. Turns out nobody else does.
Right. and so I think, to me, the big light bulb moment was recognizing that we need to be as evidence-based with our science communication as we are with doing physical science. And the evidence tells us that evidence isn't always working. That you need to understand how people think, understand psychology, how people change their beliefs and how they change their behavior. And it's an extraordinarily complicated thing.
It is. So right now you are, what are you doing right now?
I'm doing a PhD in cognitive psychology.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's really exploring how people think about climate change, and also how do people update their beliefs about climate change when they're told certain types of information.
That really is the issue, isn't it? Because we've known that climate is changing and that humans are responsible for over 100 years. And 100 years and, 10,000, 15,000 journal articles haven't changed as many minds as we need to fix this problem.
Right. And so at the first part of my my PhD, I was looking at communicating the consensus, because there was other studies by Ed Mybach and Tony Lazarowitz showing that communicating the consensus, at least when they did it in the lab, had a really strong effect on helping people be more accepting that climate change is happening. But then when you look at, and we've been communicating the consensus in the public, but public opinion or public perception of consensus hadn't changed that much. So does that mean consensus isn't, like, consensus messaging doesn't work? But then at the same, like, we don't operate in a vacuum. It's not just us telling people about the 97% consensus. There's these other groups strongly saying there is no consensus. There's 31,000 scientists who disagree, and so what the science tells us is when you have positive messages and then negative messages, they cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, interesting.
And this is a study that Sander van der Linden and working with Ed Mybach and Tony Lazarowitz have found, is that misinformation can cancel out good information, which means that even if we're working as hard as possible to craft good science communication, all that work can be undone. And so then they looked at, all right, well, what's the solution? Like,
Exactly, you can't just leave it there.
And they found that if they inoculated people, if they provided an inoculating message before the misinformation, then it cancelled out the misinformation effect, and the good information was allowed to flourish.
That's a great analogy, like a vaccine.
Well, exactly, a vaccine. And by inoculation, what they did was explain the techniques of the misinformation, expose them to a weak form of the misinformation, etc. So that's really the take-home message that I've got out of my whole PhD research, is that the way to stop science denial isn't just throwing more science at people. We actually have to expose people to a weak form of the science denial to stop it from spreading.
That makes total sense. So we're live here at COP in Paris. I'm talking with John Cook from Skeptical Science. This broadcast is not going to be archived on Periscope. As soon as we turn the phone off, it is gone. But I am saving it on my phone, and we are going to post it on Twitter, on Facebook, and I imagine you'll probably post the link too. All right, one last question for John, which is, and this is the question I think is the most important. So our heads are stuffed with all types of scientific facts, and they're also increasingly being stuffed with all types of social science facts. As you just said, the social science is really the most important part of moving forward on climate change today. But for you, how does that connect to what's in your heart? What is what really motivates you to do this work?
What motivates me?
Yeah.
Well, I think what motivates me is being a father. Like the desire to hand over to my child a world that ideally would be better than the world that was given me. And I think that the way we're going, my generation will be the first generation that hands over to our children a world that's worse than the world that we were given. So yeah, I think that just when I think about how future generations are going to look back at this time, they're going to look at the way we ignored the climate crisis in the same way that we look at past generations in slavery. We think, how could they allow that to happen? How could they tolerate that level of injustice? And so I'm working as hard as I can to try to I guess, address the issue, to address the issue of injustice, because at its heart, climate change is a social justice issue.
Yep, it is. An issue of love, or failing to love. That's a perfect segue, because this afternoon I'm going to be talking with Moms Clean Air Force. Moms Clean Air Force is a great organization that's all about moms bringing their kids. They have play-ins on Capitol Hill and things like that, talking about how we care about this issue because of our kids, which I do.